Happy Tuesday, everybody. Remember, Twitch is tonight. Twitch Tuesdays. Maybe playing Tropico again. Not sure. And of course, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Because your Patreon support allows me to not rely on hot takes. And this is the topic today. Because I've been getting accused of hot takes a lot. And of late, this started becoming this thing where people are like, ever since the Mortal Kombat Jax thing, people are like, stop the hot takes. And I'm like, it's been happening so often by people who've been watching my content for a long time. And of course, they never actually explain the hot take element of their complaint. Just, you're doing hot takes. So I looked it up. And unfortunately, there's no clear definition of what a hot take is. Merriam-Webster and Wikipedia disagree on what in fact it is. The Merriam-Webster basically says, they say loosely speaking, because there's no definitive analysis and they are a dictionary company. A hot take is a published reaction or analysis of a recent news event that, often because of its time-sensitive nature, doesn't offer much in the way of deep reflection. Now, Wikipedia says a hot take is a piece of deliberately provocative commentary that is based almost entirely on shallow moralizing. So we sort of have three general pieces of a hot take. One, it's rushed. Two, it's derivative or, not well thought out. And three, the shallow moralizing part. Now, the Merriam-Webster definition focuses more on the, derivative and rushed elements of the hot take. Wikipedia kind of focuses more on the moralizing element with a side of derivativeness, and they add, and I guess this should be a fourth thing, provocation. So a hot take is provocative. It's a rushed timeline, so it's out like immediately after something happens. It's shallow and derivative, and it's moralizing. Those are the components of a hot take. And based on that, I have no idea where people are getting the idea that my content is hot takes of late, because a big part of the other complaint I get is, and this has been going on for much longer, is that I overthink things and my videos are too long. Both cannot be true. I don't moralize terribly frequently. There are a few things that I do sort of go, nope, this is wrong, no questions. But that's really not, like, having morality isn't the same thing as moralizing. Moralizing is more, think of the children. And I'm aware I'm speaking in idioms right now. Like, we're using an idiom to explain an idiom to explain an idiom. And I think that's part of the problem with communication in a digital age, is we're speaking primarily through slang and idioms to show these sort of tribal designations of, how do you do, fellow youths, sort of thing. How you do, fellow kids, like showing your hip, right? And I don't like doing that because I like words to mean something. Some of the stuff just makes me laugh. The idea that thirsty is what horny used to be, and salty is basically pissed off. Like, it's always funny when I hear salty in the real world. It's weird to hear that word instead of read it on a screen, but that's sort of become more broadly adopted. And then I started thinking, okay, so people accusing me of hot takes are doing hot takes of their own. They use hot take as a pejorative because the idea of, moralizing is something that violates internet sensibilities. For some reason, the internet, there's a fine line between moralizing and emotional reasoning, and the internet really doesn't like emotional reasoning, even though it happens all the time. And I think, unfortunately, as various articles on hot takes have said hot takes are now just something that's used as a pejorative to dismiss an idea that people don't like. Instead of examining the idea based on its merits, this is a hot take, and they need to provide no other explanation for it. The funniest sort of circular hot take that apparently happened was a BuzzFeed editor took down an article critical of one of BuzzFeed's advertisers. And the explanation for taking down the article was, we don't do hot takes, or we're trying not to do hot takes. BuzzFeed trying not to do hot takes. I know it hurt my brain too, but the internet pounced on this editor, a guy named Ben Smith, because the accusation of hot take in this case was in and of itself a hot take. And once we get this silly, you have to wonder whether the word is useful or whether the word is just another sort of cool kid way of bullying unpopular ideas. And I think it's sort of in between at this point. I think it's too easy to say. I think a lot of people have become very lazy in their assigning of hot take status to a piece. Just because something's out quickly doesn't mean it's a hot take. Somebody could have just gotten lucky that they were preparing a piece. Sometimes op-ed writers know something's coming, and so they get the piece ready, or they write two pieces based on, well, if it goes this way, I'm going to publish this piece. If it goes that way, I'm going to publish the other piece. So they weren't rushed, and they were well thought out. Others, they can say something about a piece that doesn't require a lot of thought, because it's just sort of, well, this is another brick in the wall in terms of these phenomenon, especially regarding politics. Apparently the term actually came from sports, where apparently a lot of moralizing goes on with certain things. Apparently the heavy coverage of Tim Tebow back in the day was sort of where hot takes got popularized. I didn't know that either. So that's really interesting that it came from sports. But I think we got to be really careful not to dismiss ideas that make us uncomfortable as hot takes. And this is why I sort of don't subscribe to the whole hot take theory. Sometimes somebody getting really pissed off about something and writing about it is instructive. It allows other people who don't have similar experiences to be able to empathize with a person going through a particular situation. I mean, notably in the past, gay rights got a big boost from that kind of empathy writing. Now trans rights are going through a similar struggle. That's another thing that I might do a video on. Let me know if you want me to talk about this on Feedback Friday, on how I think sort of the LGBTQ plus moniker is getting us into trouble, because gay rights and trans rights do have some similarities, but their differences make them kind of separate issues. And I think that certain letters in that alphabet soup are getting short shrift because the certain civil rights fights privilege other letters. Let me know if that's something you want me to talk about. But a hot take isn't an empathy exercise, right? It usually is somebody scolding something just as an easy, apparently in politics, a hot take via James Carville was something that was appealing to popular moralizing. So hence, again, think of the children, for instance, the parental advisory labels on music, in the Tipper Gore era, which were designed to stop the horrible practice of polluting children's minds, but only really made the things with the parental advisory thing cooler. I lived through that era. Like, that's all it did. it created a culture war based on generations. And that is where I think hot takes, the accusation of hot take does have a certain validity, is when it comes to the culture war. And this is a very, very narrow usage. So to be clear, I'm not saying throw it out completely, but I am saying that the comment is overused. We all know certain media outlets are overuse the hot takes. They're pretty notorious for them. BuzzFeed being one of them. The Guardian being another one. The Daily Mail moralizes heavily in some of its stories. I say that in air quotes because it's very tabloid. You can probably think some others. I mean, gaming sites have been uniquely bad for hot takes, mostly because they're very young writers at these sites usually, or they're older and bitter and probably should move on, but there's no upward mobility in games journalism. Editors don't see it. They're rushed out. It's all about write, produce. If you spend more than 45 minutes on a piece, you're not going to make any money because the pay scales got demolished in 2014, 2015, like reduced to like 40% of what they were. If you're wondering why there are so many hot takes in gaming, it's because of pay. It's advertising got decimated by the culture war fighting. Gaming is seen as a bad bet by advertisers, and so you have to produce so much more to make the same amount of money you made back in the day. It's crappy. It's part of the reason I went to YouTube. Not that YouTube doesn't have its own hot takes, more on that in a bit, but they do. Hot takes are encouraged by the model, in part search engine optimization, same as YouTube, but also just this desire on the part of people in gaming to say something important, right? More on that tomorrow. There's a reason I'm making this video today, because I do not want to get accused of a hot take tomorrow. I will fucking scream and I know it's, see, now I say it, and now if anybody accused me of a hot take tomorrow, I'm like, they're just trolling. Interesting unintentional insulation. Okay, so don't bother, because I think you're just trolling. But this idea of saying something important in gaming, the idea that gaming is frivolous and, not terribly important and all that stuff, I'm really sick of that inferiority complex. I'm sick of that self-esteem issue that gaming has. Gaming being frivolous and fun and taking people away from their troubles is really, really important. And I don't like this need among, the gaming paparazzi, for lack of a better term, to have to make everything mean something. Sometimes it just doesn't. Sometimes it's just stupid fun. That's totally grown up to understand that sometimes you just need stupid fun. There's nothing wrong with it. Quite the opposite. You can't be serious all the time. We have to get better at taking jokes and understanding fun and recognizing that people are not being serious with everything they say, and stop getting so damn offended over everything. And I don't just mean the people that lean left with that. The people who lean right with stuff get offended just as much as lefties do. It may be over different things, but oh my God, the outrage is just too much. And I think that might be what people are reacting to when they use the term hot take. Some things are worth getting angry about. Some things are, mass death is worth getting upset about. Climate change and climate migration, climate refugees. Those are things worth getting upset about. Inaction in government, that's worth getting upset about. A lot of the things that people fight to the death about over media are really not worth the screaming. And that's what tomorrow's video is going to be about. The point where I think that it is worth criticizing, and I'll use gaming, but this is true of general media, with hot takes, and this can be critiqued without using the term hot take, and which makes the term hot take kind of useless other than a shorthand, is when people, it really comes across like an article is trying to shame people into not enjoying what they're watching or what they're playing anymore. And this is something I think that's really poorly understood in terms of the cultural criticism of video games and like nerd stuff in general. A lot of us are playing this stuff just for stupid escapism, and we don't like the assumption that we are somehow bad people for doing that. We know it's not real. We know it's, some of the things people do in video games, they're doing it precisely because it's not a very nice thing to do. And I think there's a place for that. I have a bit of trouble playing games like Tropico because there are certain, like, when the religious faction wants me to implement a contraceptive ban, I usually find a way to talk out of it or just fail out like, screw you, no. But, in a sense, that's the choice that makes gaming so fun, and why being confronted with difficult stuff when done properly in an interactive medium is good. It's fun. It's enjoyable. But when people start, say for instance, somebody wrote a hot take that having a contraceptive ban option in Tropico at all is creating a anti-abortion message and it's wrong for women, that's bringing something in a place it doesn't belong. As soon as somebody starts doing that, everybody goes, I don't want to have to think too hard about this. And I think that's the reaction. I think that when people start trying to bring in that think of the children instinct to something that kids aren't going to get anyway. This isn't a kid area. Like, give me a friggin' break. Just go away. That's when people start getting really annoyed. And that's where I kind of see a role for hot takes. Now, I can see how somebody could be misconstruing what I did with like the Marvel films and Game of Thrones and all that stuff. But that wasn't what I was doing. I was examining the reactions to the medium. I was taking it on their terms. People read a lot of, to me, perplexing stuff into what I consider brainless entertainment. I don't consider Game of Thrones as smart as everybody else does. It's tits, ass, and dragons and blood. That's the appeal. And some great acting, some absolutely great acting. But history Mad Libs is not deep thought as far as I'm concerned. If other people get stuff out of it, that's great. Not me. The Marvel films, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, similarly, people write these pieces, these think pieces on what it says about heroism and sacrifice and all this stuff. And that's when I start going, gag. And so what I was doing was a response to that. Like, if you want me to swallow this, this has this massive thing about heroism embedded in this, instead of just being, look, explosions and big digital effects, well, we're going to go all the way down that rabbit hole, strap in. That's not the same as the instinct to go there in the first place, because it was thought out. It's a compare and contrast that actually was, it took a lot of pondering. Just because you don't agree doesn't mean it wasn't thought out. And I would have preferred if, Marvel made up its mind whether they were trying to say deep things about heroism and people and the human condition, or they were just trying to make ridiculous fun movies, or they kind of made it clear which ones were which somehow. Because, Black Panther definitely had a lot of deep stuff in it that not everybody's going to get because of cultural distinctions. There was a lot of Afro-Caribbean diaspora stuff in Black Panther. Now, there were also battle rhinos, so it worked on multiple levels. But a movie like Captain Marvel is actually kind of boring if you're not really looking for some sort of uplifting girl power thing, right down to the soundtrack. And then you get a movie like Ant-Man that's just sort of dumb fun. Aquaman's the same way. There was no deep meaning, and I know that's not Marvel, that's DC, but there was no deep meaning in Aquaman. It was visual spectacle, that's it, which actually sort of disappointed me. I was hoping for more because it draws on that sort of Arthurian myth, but it was what it was. You can't force meaning into things that don't have very much. Unfortunately, a lot of these directors that direct these like pop culture spectacles want, as game developers do, to say something when moviegoers are just like, show me a good time. Take me away from my troubles for a certain amount of time. That's what I'm paying you for. If you can put other things in as well, awesome. But please make it fun first. And that's where I think a lot of the freaking out has come from. More on that tomorrow. Today, I'm just going to leave it here with, there is a place for an objection to hot takes. But again, it's got to be on a case-by-case basis. And then it's just sort of like, there's other ways to be more specific in your critiques. But there is a place for it. Just please do me a favor, and I think every other content creator out there will agree with me. We have to deal with popular topics to get anyone to watch what we do. Just dealing with a popular topic, something that's trendy, is not a hot take. As long as it's not shallow, it's not unduly provocative just for the sake of drawing attention, and it's not shallow moralizing. If those conditions are not met, it's not a hot take, and all you're doing is trying to silence dissent by throwing that word around too much. All right? So thanks for watching this. I hope it's taken in the spirit it's given without people freaking out. I'm so exhausted by the freaking out. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.